This video covers the case Grupo Vidawa, Rethinking a Freemium Business Model. In November 2016, Grupo Vidawa, a small software company based in Bogota, Colombia, launched KANAN Cloud, a freemium software service targeted at small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs. The software sought to help SMEs meet the new Occupational Health and Safety, or OHS regulations. These regulations, which could come into effect in January 2017, made having an OHS management system compulsory for all organizations in the country. A year after its launch, KANAN Cloud had about 500 free users and 6 paying customers. Further, the software use time was extremely low. A few circumstances seem to explain these results. The OHS regulations appeared overly complex to most small business owners. The regulations kept changing throughout 2017, creating uncertainty about both the scope of the OHS requirements for organizations and their implementation schedule, and the OHS service market became saturated with cheap, quick-fix offers that seemed to address small businesses' immediate needs but only scratched the surface of the actual requirements of an OHS system. In December 2017, at their biannual meeting, Grupo Vidawa's company directors evaluated the results of the first year of the KANAN Cloud Business Initiative and had to decide how to proceed. The alternatives on the table were shutting down KANAN Cloud or adjusting the business model to sell and implement KANAN Cloud through allied OHS consultants. After reading the case, you should be able to analyze a business opportunity, describe a business model and its comprising elements, estimate the potential sales costs and profits of a freemium business model, evaluate the results of an entrepreneurship initiative and discuss the underlying causes of these results, assess and justify appropriate pivots or adjustments to a business model, and finally, propose specific ways in which business model hypotheses can be tested. Describe the core elements of KANAN Cloud's business model. A business model defines how the enterprise creates and delivers value to customers and then converts payments received to profits. Current conceptualizations of business models converge in considering 5 constitutive elements. In terms of value proposition, a business model must clearly articulate the product or service offering, i.e., what the business offers to users of the product or service, the target segment of customers, i.e., which users will be served by the offering, and the revenue model, i.e., how the business gets paid. On the operational side, a business model must formulate the company's value chain structure, i.e., how the company sets up and governs the processes required to create and distribute the offering to its target market, and its cost structure, i.e., how costs are generated to deploy the offering. You may already be familiar with the freemium business model from using services such as Spotify, Dropbox, or iCloud. A quick and effective way to think about KANAN Cloud's business model is by listing a few of the freemium services that you know firsthand. Also, what are the most popular ones? Can you identify which services have structured as freemium business models? This may make it easier to study this case. The constitutive elements of KANAN Cloud's business model are outlined subsequently. First, service offering and target segment. A key feature of any freemium model is the use of a tiered service offering, whereby free users get a basic offer at no cost and premium users get additional services for a fee. In many cases, free and freemium plans are targeted at distinct customer segments with differentiated needs. KANAN Cloud has 3 plans. First, a free plan provided users with OHS software services that covered about 20% of the mandatory requirements. This plan was meant to create value to its users by helping them learn about OHS and the legal framework around it. It was targeted at SMEs with little or no understanding of or experience with OHS management systems. The Tier 1 paid plan provided users with OHS software services that covered 100% of the mandatory requirements. The plan intended to create value for users interested in truthful and full regulatory compliance by helping them manage the information relating to their OHS management system, hence easing the burden associated with OHS implementations. Grupo Vidawa hoped that, as OHS had become mandatory for all organizations in the country, the number of SMEs in this segment would increase steadily over time. The Tier 2 paid plan provided users with OHS software services that exceeded mandatory requirements. The plan aimed to create value to users by helping them use the data generated by their OHS system to make decisions. As such, it was targeted at the most sophisticated SMEs who already understood the value of a management system approach to OHS and the value of data-driven decision-making. Another constitutive element is the revenue model. The case mentions three monetization strategies typically found in freemium business models: advertising, the sale of user data, and subscription fees from the premium plan. KANAN Cloud only relied on the last of these strategies. This design decision made sense because at most, the company expected to onboard 1,500 users by the end of its first year of operation, and it would be hard to sell user data or raise advertising money with such a small user base. The third constitutive element is the value chain. KANAN Cloud had a typical software-as-a-service value chain comprising the following core activities: software development and maintenance, software hosting and operation, sales and marketing, and customer support. Grupo Vidawa had chosen to operate KAWAK, or K-A-W-A-K, and then KANAN Cloud from an external data center, and to use the external online payment system for payment transactions. All other core activities were performed with in-house resources. Grupo Vidawa also had a small budget for paid online marketing, hoping it could primarily draw on word of mouth and search engine optimization to grow KANAN Cloud's user base. The company had designed a combination of self-service and more traditional techniques to provide customer support, videos for self-learning, and email and live chat channels for personal customer support. These design choices were all typical in freemium business models. The fourth constitutive element is the cost structure. Freemium models should strive for near zero marginal costs to ensure that user base growth can effectively translate into profit. Exhibit TN1 shown here describes KANAN Cloud's cost structure and shows the growth drivers for each cost element. The exhibit makes clear that although some of KANAN Cloud's costs are fixed, thereby helping achieve the goal of near zero marginal costs, others such as online payment system fees and customer support costs will increase as the user base grows. Thus, there might be design issues around these cost elements that KANAN Cloud needs to monitor and perhaps rethink as it learns more about user onboarding, retention, and conversion behaviors. Summing up, although most of the elements of KANAN Cloud's business model seem to align well with standard industry practice for premium services and seem to be sensible to the context, some specific aspects of the cost structure might need to be reconsidered going forward to boost KANAN Cloud's profitability. Create 3 5-year scenarios, optimistic, pessimistic, and middle ground, that estimate sales, costs, and gross profit for KANAN Cloud. Exhibit TN2 shown here provides sales, cost, and gross profit estimations for KANAN Cloud. Revenues for the optimistic and pessimistic scenarios were based on the parameters available in Case Exhibit 3. The middle ground scenario was not provided by the company, but calculated by the case author as a midpoint between the optimistic and the pessimistic targets set by the company for all the relevant metrics. For example, the company set the optimistic target market share for year 1 as 0.1% and the pessimistic target as 0.01%. Therefore, a reasonable midpoint between the two was set at 0.05%. Likewise, Case Exhibit 3 provides only target values for years 1 and 5. Intermediate target values for all the relevant metrics were developed, assuming a somewhat linear trajectory throughout the 5-year period. Market size, i.e. the number of SMEs in the country, and average sales price, ASP, were left constant for the analyzed period. The ASP was equated to the Tier 2 price, which produced a conservative estimation. Cost estimates were also produced on the basis of the parameters available in Exhibit 3 in your case. Again, certain items were kept constant for the analyzed period, namely software development and maintenance costs and digital marketing costs. The remainder, as shown in Exhibit TN1, fluctuated according to the number of users. The meaning of number of users varies depending on the expense in question. Some cost items are based on the number of active users, that is, registered users who actually use the software, also called retained users, whereas other cost items are based on the number of paying users. Similarly, the number of users changes for the optimistic and pessimistic scenarios based on the company's predefined estimation parameters, whereas the number of users for the middle ground scenario had to be developed by the case author. Working through these scenarios helps realize a number of structural considerations around a standard freemium model, such as the following. Revenue is mostly driven by the company's ability to attract and onboard new users to the service, and then to convert a portion of them, a sufficiently large one, into paying customers. This, in turn, comes back to the value proposition. How valuable the service offering is to the targeted users, both free and premium. Looking at KANAN Cloud's revenue figures in particular, it is clear that the initiative can only work from a financial standpoint if the company manages to make the optimistic or the middle ground scenario happen. For this, Grupo Vidawa needs to carefully monitor and manage the evolution of key metrics, such as market share, conversion rate, and retention rate from the beginning. Similarly, notice that for the model to be financially appealing, costs must be structured so that as the user base grows, they either stay constant or increase at a slower pace than does the revenue. This is the near zero marginal cost logic mentioned previously. This is why paid online marketing and pay-per-click marketing specifically is often not advisable in this context. Although it makes sense that any freemium provider may consider using pay-per-click advertising to begin with, it is also clear that paid online marketing is not financially viable for freemium providers in the long run. A look at KANAN Cloud figures will help to elaborate on this point. One way of looking at this is through the customer acquisition cost, or CAC metric, used to analyze whether marketing costs can be recovered via price. CAC is equal to total marketing expenses divided by the number of acquired customers. In freemium models, acquired customers are equated to acquired users. For the first year of KANAN Cloud in the middle ground scenario, this is estimated as follows. CAC equals $18,000 divided by 26 users equals $692 per customer. Note that everything in this video has been converted to US dollars. This result is unacceptable. Therefore, the company would need to make sure that it is able to grow its user base at the expected rate without depending on paid online marketing, such as through word of mouth, search engine optimization, and other less expensive marketing tools. Think about two additional business design issues that might not be efficient from a financial perspective. These are customer service and online payment system fees. The first grows linearly with retention, whereas the second grows with conversion. Fees for online payment systems can be negotiable after a given sales floor, and customer service might need to be restructured, for example considering further automation, so that economies of scale can be achieved. Compare KANAN Cloud's actual first-year results with these scenarios. Based on this comparison, evaluate and explain KANAN Cloud's actual results. Has the initiative failed or succeeded? How so? Before translating KANAN Cloud's first-year results into financial figures, it is worth spending some time discussing what success may mean and how it can be measured in a freemium context in general before moving to assess KANAN Cloud's results specifically. Dave McClure, a U.S. industry expert, created the Pirate AARRR framework, a set of metrics that Internet startups can use to track market interest and response to their offerings. This is what the AARRR framework would track in a freemium context. Acquisition, people who are attracted to the service, for example by visiting the website. Activation, people who register to use the service. Retention, people who keep using the service for a certain amount of time after registering for it. Referral, people who refer other potential users to the service. And revenue, people who pay for the premium service, first by subscribing to it and then by continuing to use it over time. According to this framework, a successful freemium company is one that is capable of reaching its targets for each of these metrics in a timely fashion. The first two metrics, acquisition and activation, speak to the initial market interest in the service, whereas the last three, retention, referral, and revenue, address the company's ability to turn such market interest into value for both the users and the company. Additionally, as discussed in the previous section, success in freemium models is also related to the company's ability to manage its costs efficiently. Thus, a truly commercially successful freemium company will not only achieve its target metrics on the revenue side, but will also be able to manage its costs so that unit costs remain below the average revenue per user even after growth. Can you identify key success factors for freemium models? Several have been discussed in the academic and practitioner literature. First, the existence of a large enough market that is potentially interested in the service offering, i.e., given that numbers will steadily shrink as users move along the conversion funnel. It will be apparent to some of you that the company needs to start from a large potential market if it wants to be profitable. Second, a service offering that is so valuable to its target users that it does a good job retaining them as active users for as long as possible and prompts these users to voluntarily spread the word about the service to people they know. Third, a compelling, easy to understand, and properly balanced differentiation between the free and the premium offer, which gives free users a valuable product while saving some value-added features only for customers who are willing to pay for them. And fourth, a near-zero marginal cost structure. Moving on to KANAN Cloud, Exhibit TN3, shown here, shows an estimation of KANAN Cloud's first-year results compared with the two scenarios closest to these results, the middle ground and the pessimistic scenarios. The estimation of first-year results combined with data available in the case about KANAN Cloud's actual performance, i.e. the number of registered users and number of paying users, and projected cost data available in case Exhibit 3. Actual costs were not available from the company. When KANAN Cloud's results are compared with these projections, the main issues to be noticed are as follows. First, acquisition and activation. KANAN Cloud attracted to its website 13.5% of the people who saw the advertisement on Google. This figure highly exceeds the company's most optimistic expectation, 5%. And is way above the market average of 1.91%. However, the company only managed to onboard 503 users, equating to a 0.03% market share. This number sits right between the middle ground and pessimistic projections. It means that most of the people who went to KANAN Cloud's website did not register for the free version. Other important issues are retention and conversion revenue. Here, KANAN Cloud seems to have underperformed severely in its first year. In its pessimistic outlook, the company hoped to convert 2% of its users to the premium service, but it only managed to convert 1%. This might indicate that the users who registered did not find enough value in the offering, which would comprise not only the company's ability to accrue revenue from the current users, but also its chances of organically growing its user base via word of mouth. Alternatively, this low conversion rate could signal a poor balance between the free and premium product. However, if that were the case, it would be reasonable to expect comparatively high retention rates with low conversion rates. KANAN Cloud's retention rate was also very low, 1%, which makes this poor balance hypothesis less likely to be the source of the low conversion rate problem. Note that a 1% conversion rate is not unusual among some freemium companies, as indicated in the case. What other revenue metric would the company need to adjust so that KANAN Cloud could be financially viable with a 1% conversion rate? The answer is market share. Additionally, notice that although the case mentions that conversion rates between 1 and 5% are common, it also states that not all freemium companies have been financially successful. Therefore, these conversion rates can be a helpful reference point, but they need to be considered with caution. Going forward, if Grupo Vidawa wants to keep KANAN Cloud, it would need to work harder on making its service offering much more compelling based on actual experience with the product and on ensuring as much as possible that the target segment is truly interested in this service offering. What premises seem to have guided Grupo Vidawa's management team in their structuring of KANAN Cloud's freemium business model? Grupo Vidawa's structuring of KANAN Cloud's freemium business model seems to have been guided by three premises. First, the company assumed that new OHS regulation created a sufficiently large latent demand for OHS management software among SMEs. Although this could turn out to be true, it is also well known among Colombian business practitioners that the country, just as many other emerging economies, usually has severe difficulties enforcing legislation, and that OHS has not been taken seriously by many businesses in the past. As such, it was unreasonable to expect that SMEs would react to the new OHS legislation in a way that resulted in actual implementation of OHS systems. Therefore, a market for OHS management software was not opened. Second, OHS management could be simplified enough to enable the self-implementation of OHS management software. Before KANAN Cloud, Grupo Vidawa had always provided personal support to KAWAC implementation processes. KANAN Cloud represented the first time that the company tried an implementation model that did not involve personal support. Third, KANAN Cloud would be easy to use for SMEs. Again, the personal support implementation model used until the introduction of KANAN Cloud could address, through training, any difficulties that users might experience, thereby hiding or circumventing usability issues that the software may still have. Which of these premises were key to the success of KANAN Cloud? Were these premises tested before launch? If yes, how so? If no, how could they have been tested? The successful functioning of KANAN Cloud's business model was highly dependent on the accuracy of these three premises. First, the possibility of attracting companies in the target segments relied on the existence of latent demand for OHS management software. Second, acquiring and retaining paying customers depended on how valuable customers perceived the service offering to be. Because KANAN Cloud promised to ease the burden of OHS management, customers would need to find the software easy to use and helpful in facilitating OHS self-implementation. Given that the three premises were at the core of KANAN Cloud's business model, they were all key to the success of KANAN Cloud. At the opportunity recognition phase, scholars and practitioners recommend that businesses engage in experimentation and intensive learning to explore the fundamentals of their business models, for example, willingness to pay and customer needs, and reduce the uncertainty and risk of their nascent business ideas. The lean startup methodology urges entrepreneurs to put their business model ideas to the test before spending valuable resources on full-fledged implementation. To do that, entrepreneurs should make their business model ideas amenable to empirical testing. That is, they should think of their business model as a set of falsifiable hypotheses and go to the market to test these hypotheses and learn from the results. For example, one could test customer interest in a product by showing a mock-up of the product to a sample of potential customers, thereby learning about customer needs while saving time and money. The case provides no indication that Grupo Vidawa engaged in testing the guiding premises of KANAN Cloud's business model before it was launched, despite evidence suggesting that these premises might not hold true. Can you think of case facts supporting or opposing these premises to examine how Grupo Vidawa approached each premise before launch? What do you think the company learned about these premises after launch? The company seemed to have trusted its optimistic intuition. This bias toward optimism is not unusual among startups. An antidote to this that is recommended by promoters of the lean startup methodology is the early testing of business model premises and design choices. Emergent market dynamics commonly rely on turning premises into realities, which is difficult to accomplish in an emerging economy context. Common salient features of emerging economies include the unequal distribution of wealth, with a large portion of the population living near or below the poverty line. Second, institutional voids, mainly in the form of weak legal systems and poor or very slow law enforcement. And third, a significant presence of the informal economy, leaving a large portion of economic activity off the government's radar. These features should help you grasp how unlikely it was in this context to expect that small businesses would be quick to react to new legislation, especially in a way that aligned with the interests of Grupo Vidawa. It was reasonable to expect the opposite. Most small businesses, severely resource constrained as many of them were, would either do nothing in the hope that the government would not run inspections anytime soon, or would try to find an inexpensive way to pretend to be compliant. Think about how Grupo Vidawa could have tested their three premises before actually building the product in ways that were both instructive and cost efficient. Here are some ideas. Regarding Premise 1, market interest, an online marketing campaign announcing KANAN Cloud and its plans could have been implemented. Users who clicked on the link would be directed to a landing page with further details and call to action buttons for each plan, followed by registration forms. Everything would be tracked so that the company could gather data about interested customers without having to deploy the software in full. A survey or A/B testing could have been used to explore customers' interest in the product, willingness to pay, and potential adoption barriers, for example, cash centricity or lack of interest in OHS. Another idea concerns Premise 2. OHS could be simplified to allow self-implementation. In essence, the company would be trying to learn whether OHS implementation could be made simple enough for SME customers. Because Grupo Vidawa hired experienced OHS consultants to define the product scope, the company could have used this expert knowledge to design tests that aim to assess whether OHS implementation complexity could be reduced. They could have designed a few webinars to improve OHS knowledge among a small group of SMEs and then determined whether the perceived complexity of OHS had decreased within these companies. Next, they could have broken down OHS implementation into smaller pieces. If they first identified the least complex OHS implementation steps, they could have presented one or just a few of them to a small group of SMEs to gather their thoughts. The idea behind this would be to develop an incremental approach to deal with OHS complexity. Grupo Vidawa could have drawn upon some of the principles of gamification, such as rankings or rewards, to engage users with OHS practices and induce a more positive attitude toward it. They could then have tested whether such ideas proved helpful in reducing perceived OHS complexity. Another idea concerns Premise 3. KANAN Cloud was easy to use. Technically, KANAN Cloud was only a new user interface that put together pieces of functionality from various KAWAK modules. KAWAK had been in existence for 10 years, the last two as a cloud service. Most of KANAN Cloud already existed, although packaged as KAWAK, which made it practically impossible for Grupo Vidawa to consider following a standard minimum variable product approach in which a startup develops and tests product mock-ups, or even just videos as Dropbox did in its beginnings, before building the actual product. It seems reasonable that Grupo Vidawa did not test for ease of use because the company was only repackaging a portion of an already commercially successful software product. However, KANAN Cloud aimed to capture a different target segment and also added a new user interface. These two differences were sufficiently strong reasons to conduct usability tests. One test could have focused on a couple of specific OHS functionalities already available with KAWAK to see if targeted users, i.e. SME owners with no OHS experience, understood the software logic and OHS terminology. Another test could have used a user interface mock-up to check whether targeted users could navigate correctly and efficiently through the software. Even if it was not entirely possible to follow a user-centric software development process because most of the product had already been built, the company could and should have involved some of KANAN Cloud's target users throughout its repackaging efforts. The goal of this discussion is not to obtain well-developed testing proposals, but to help students become comfortable with a wide range of ideas about how to test business hypotheses before launching a product. Think about the negative consequences of not testing business hypotheses during the opportunity recognition phase. By not testing the premises of KANAN Cloud's business model soon enough, Grupo Vidawa exposed itself to too much risk, and it did so unnecessarily. The case shows that there are ways in which the company could have tested these premises in a relatively inexpensive yet effective manner. How should Grupo Vidawa go about deciding what to do with KANAN Cloud going forward? What process can they use to make the decision? Let us start to address this question by recapping the main issues facing Grupo Vidawa as it decides the future of the KANAN Cloud initiative. There are no strong indications that the Colombian SME market is interested in a service offering such as KANAN Cloud. The company only attained a 0.3% market share in its first year, a figure far below its optimistic 1% target and much closer to its 0.1% pessimistic projection. Further, although the SME market has started to spend money on OHS-related products and services, it seems that the market is doing so from a quick fix perspective and disregarding alternatives aimed at truly tackling the complexities of OHS implementation. The perceived value of KANAN Cloud's offering does not seem compelling enough to make registered users continue to use the service, let alone pay for it or refer it to other potential users. The retention rate and conversion rates of KANAN Cloud were below even the lowest projection. SMEs find OHS implementation cumbersome, and the software does not seem to be helping registered users think otherwise. To make matters worse, it appears that these users do not find the software easy to use. Therefore, for the company to reach an informed decision about whether the KANAN Cloud initiative should be adjusted and retained or simply dropped, it needs to build much more certainty around three central questions. First, can a sufficiently large number of SMEs develop a genuine interest in OHS management software? Are there other ways beyond learning videos in which OHS implementation can be made simpler and the software more useful to SMEs? Third, how can KANAN Cloud be changed so that its target users perceive it to be easy to use? These three questions are variations of the core premises discussed earlier. These premises are amenable to empirical testing in ways described. Gathering evidence around these questions is extremely relevant. If Grupo Vidawa quickly discovers that the answers to these questions do not meet its commercial interests, it can halt the initiative and avoid spending more resources on it. Although Grupo Vidawa is not a startup, it is a similarly resource-constrained company facing uncertainty regarding central aspects of its new service offering. For this reason, the insights of the lean startup methodology are relevant to the analysis of this case. Before relaunching KANAN Cloud, the company would greatly benefit from taking an experimental approach to reducing uncertainty, listening to and learning from customers, and trying variations of its business model on a small scale. Note that the question does not ask about whether the company should accept or reject Benia's proposal, but rather about the process the company should use to make the decision. Now, as Benia's proposal is on the table, we can borrow some process ideas from the lean startup methodology to explore this proposal. We can start by assessing whether Benia's proposal tackles the three uncertainties surrounding KANAN Cloud: market interest, complexity reduction in OHS implementation, and the software's ease of use. The proposal is sharply focused on the second of these uncertainties, while ignoring the first and third ones. With respect to the second uncertainty, Benia's proposal advances a solution that could reduce the perceived complexity of OHS implementation by giving SMEs what they say they want: an OHS consultant to hold their hands throughout the implementation process. It does so in a cost-effective manner, as these consultants become business allies and not a direct cost for Grupo Vidawa. That said, the extent to which SMEs are interested in this arrangement, or more specifically in having their OHS consultants use and purchase OHS software for them, is still an empirical question that a Grupo Vidawa should test on a small scale before fully engaging with this proposal. The company should distinguish between the interest shown by some OHS consultants and the potential interest of SMEs who ultimately would still be paying for KANAN Cloud. Even if Benia's proposed pivot or adjustment to the original business model was tested and the company found it appealing to SMEs, the question remains as to how to change KANAN Cloud to make it easier to use. Here, the company would need to focus on testing and fixing ease of use perceived by OHS consultants, given that the pivot proposes to split users from buyers. If Benia's proposal does not pass these initial tests, Grupo Vidawa could still come up with new pivots and again go through the process of turning these pivots into testable hypotheses, conducting the tests, and acting based on the results. An important takeaway is that companies should not assume a static view of their business models. Companies should think of ways to improve their business models and test them, especially before committing substantial resources to implementation. So what happened? In early 2018, Grupo Vidawa shut down the KANAN Cloud business initiative. They only kept the service running for users who had previously registered and had been actively using the software. At the time of writing, the Colombian OHS legal framework had not yet stabilized. In February 2019, the Ministry of Labor issued new regulations. Many small businesses had complained to the ministry about the excessive administrative burden that OHS regulations imposed on them. The 2019 regulatory changes sought to address such concerns. And that's the end of the case. Thanks for watching.